Afternoon, councillors. We've hit just after 1 o'clock, so it's appropriate that we get on with it. First point to note is that with the vacancy of Councillor Ross Thickery, we have a vacancy for the chair's role for planning and regulatory at this point.
I'll propose Pam be the chair for the day.
I'll second that.
Sorry, Alex beat you. Any other nominations, I presume? Well done, Pam. Take it from here.
Thank you, everyone. All right, so I think firstly we need to advise that we'll be live streaming the meeting today. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, this meeting is being held via audio video conference. All members participating via video conference will count for the purpose of the meeting quorum in accordance with clause 25B of Schedule 7 to the Local Government Act 2002. The meeting is being live streamed to Council's YouTube channel. So item 1 on the agenda is apologies. I have apologies from Councillor Fox. Thank you, Alistair, for moving that. Thank you, Lee.
I also have an apology for lateness from Harry, but I don't think that's really worth. I'll just mention that at the beginning. Sorry, Pam.
Yeah, no, that is, thank you, Alex. We'll note that. You said 10 minutes or so, didn't you, just
Yep.
at start? Thank you. So we've got Alistair moved and Lee has seconded. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. Carried. Are there any conflicts of interest to share today? Alistair, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'll bring it up when we get to the minutes as well, but I'll just make a conflict of interest about anything to do with the alcohol bylaw.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Suzanne, have you got that noted?
That's fine, thanks, Councillor.
Okay. Is there any public participation today, Suzanne?
No, there's not.
Okay, thank you. So we won't have any actions from public participation. Is there any extraordinary business today?
No, there's no extraordinary business either.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. So we're starting off with A6, which is the minutes of the meeting on the 1st of September 21. Could I have a, whoops, just wait till I get there so that I can see what I'm doing. So we're considering these minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Alistair?
Yeah, Pam, I remember that we talked a great deal about the conflict of interest that I had. And when I was proposed to be the deputy chair or the alternate chair for the hearings, I actually didn't accept that nomination because of that potential conflict. So I think that needs to be clearly recognised in the minutes. And then Karen was going to go and see whether it was, but I determined it was, given my judicial status.
Okay, Karen, did you want to say anything on that?
Suzanne, just clarify for me where we are with the minutes, and did we go back and clarify that that was in error?
Yeah, Councillor, I did actually check the video again, and I don't think that you were actually removed from being the deputy at this meeting. You just declared the conflict later on.
Certainly should have been withdrawn, and I'm sure we talked about it.
I can put a little note on there if you like that you've mentioned it today.
I think it's important that it's noted that that we discussed it, and I wouldn't have accepted it anyway. So
could we just say that that Councillor Plimmer did not take up the position of alternative chair for the alcohol control bylaw hearings in view of his judicial position. There, Alex.
If perhaps we just say we accept the minutes subject to clarification of comments by Mr. Councillor Plimmer regarding conflicts of interest.
Okay, thank you. So do I have a mover to confirm those? Thank you, Mayor Alex. Seconder, thank you, Councillor Hay. All those in favour, say aye. Carried. Cool. Now we have the minutes from the, was there any discussion around those minutes or anything, any amendments or anything other than the one? No. So we have the minutes of the Planning and Regulatory Committee meeting, proposed alcohol control bylaw hearings and deliberations. A mover for those, Councillor Hay. Councillor West, would you like to? You're on mute. Oh, you weren't there.
No, not for the alcohol.
No, okay. Mayor Alex, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. All those who wish to abstain.
Oh, I suppose I have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carried. Thank you. Are there any comments or anything with regard to those minutes? Any amendments? No. Fantastic. So we're up to decision reports. We've got B1, which is the South Wyopa District Dog Pound. Rick, would you like to speak to that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just before I start, just a couple of typos that I've noted in the report, if members could just readjust these. It's on page 2 of the report, and is the under Masterton District Facility paragraphs 5 and 6. Just at the end of paragraph 5 there, it says 30.2% or, and it should be 513,400. And then just on paragraph 6, the last should be 469,200. My apologies, they slipped through.
Lovely, thank you.
So through you, Pam, sorry, Rick, would you mind repeating that last figure?
So that's just on paragraph 6, just at the end is 469,200.
Thank you very much.
So, as you're aware, the South Wyopa District pound has been in discussion for a wee while, and given we haven't, or officers haven't presented a report to the committee, thought it would be timely to put one forward. Part of that also was I thought it would be good for the committee to understand the background of where we've gone and where we're going, and what has been presented previously, as well as what our indications of a preferred option were. So part of that is that within the Wyopa region, both South Wyopa, Carterton and Masterton have all and currently looking at their dog facilities. Some call them animal facilities, some call them pounds. They all do the same thing. Now, the proposal originally was that it would be beneficial for all councils to look at whether we put in one single regional facility. And that's been gone through, as well as there was a combined situation with ourselves and Carterton. So I've done the dangerous task of going through some of those sort of discussions and broken them down to the Masterton District facility. Now, the caveat on this is the fact that I haven't been in direct contact and discussion with Masterton District themselves in regards to their facility, other than what I've heard and read through other council reports. So that the following needs to be read with that caveat put in place. So my understanding is that Masterton have gone ahead with their facility, which is much larger than the other two councils are even proposing. And they've put in a budget initially at about 1.46 million, but in recent times it seemed to have gone up to about 1.7 million. And the way the construction costs are going, you would probably see that go north towards about 2 million. Now, in the initial discussions with Masterton, it was put forward to officers for South Wyopa and Carterton at a proposal of a cost formula on an impound basis, which had an agreed fixed cost and then a cost per dog. Now, those numbers were run in around about September 2020 and put forward to the councils, and it looked like for South Wyopa that it would be about 20,800 plus, at the time we were impounding about 76 dogs at 150, giving us about 32,200. The figures that were put forward were questioned both by myself and I understand our CFO at the time as well, because the figures seemed to be a best guess. There was not a lot of detail in terms of how they came to those figures and whether the true accuracy of them. So we took those with a bit of a grain of salt. But then as it's progressed, various discussions through the committee and directions, we've looked at progressing in different areas. But I noted in recent times that Carterton put a report forward where they had been in discussions with Masterton District in regards to what it would look like now in terms of the cost basis. And they were using a formula where they were doing a shared sort of capital cost, where Carterton said their share, based on the numbers that they would have gone in with, which is about 8,950 dogs, and Carterton have about registered 2,700 dogs, which gives them that 30.2%. Now, they did their costing on the 1.7 million, and that comes out at that advised figure of 513,400. So if we were to apply that same formula, and albeit this, again, devil's always in the detail when you have discussion and negotiations, so I'm purely taking it on the basis of what CDC has come up with in their report. If we were to sort of look at that in terms of what we would come up with, the shared facility would look at Masterton having the 6,250 dogs, Carterton at 2,700 dogs, and ourselves having 3,410 dogs. So the percentage basis would split to a 50.6% of Masterton, 21.8% in Carterton, and us having a 27.6%. So if we took that on the 1.7 million and based on 27.6%, it would come out at about 469,200. That's just a comparison using that formula as we go through of where we're going. I think it's pertinent just to see what the landscape is and what figures are actually being about. What that doesn't do is for South Wyopa District Council is take into additional costs of operating, which is we're much further away, and the cost of transportation, officers' time, fatigue levels. Also, what it doesn't look at is that the facility's not a 24/7 availability to its partners. So there's a time in, time out situation. So for us, if we picked up a dog, say at 2 o'clock in the morning, we would need to hold that dog somewhere. So we would need a holding pen or a holding cell. We couldn't just put it in the back of a vehicle overnight. We would just run foul of the Animal Welfare Code. So those are sort of things, when we look at South Wyopa District Council, we have to factor in those costs as well. So the second point is the Carterton District Council and South Wyopa District Council combined facility. And this one had very good running initially when we looked at it. And we did a lot of work in the background in regards to finding out comparison facilities around the North Island and what the costs were and what they did. We presented costings to both the committee here and Carterton did the same. It was on a traditional design basis. So it was looking at a building at about 25 by 12 metres with internal kennels to house the dogs. At some point, the costs came back and the two parties or the officers from the two councils had a look and wondered whether there was a different price point that we could come to. And at this point, we went out to test the market to see whether suppliers out there and different design companies could have come up with something. Unfortunately for us, we didn't have any interest in terms of suppliers to come back to us. And we did approach a couple that had sought initial information as to whether there were specific barriers as to why no one had come forward, whether it was what we could do to facilitate better information to see if it would help. The answer came back, it was simply, we don't need this project. We have enough out there. We're booked up for the next 2.5 years. To do a quote or a tender system on this, we didn't need it. So at this point, we looked at revisiting the viability of a standalone South Wyopa District Council option. And the committee gave officers clear direction. That was something that they definitely wanted investigated. And so we went that way, and in the meantime, Carterton have progressed with a supplier that they've got a concept and design for. Now, Carterton have budgeted $370,000 for their facility, but do note and they've put this strongly to their council as well, that delays at this point in time is costing in regards to procurement of suppliers, because they won't give any guarantee on their quotes because the market is just way too fluid. So the longer the decision to go forward is made, just be aware that there are the costs that may be at this point, or the snapshot at this point in time will not is probably the better word, will not be what you would actually be paying for if you delayed a month, 2 months, 6 months down the track. A thing to note is that Carterton has their registered dogs is lower than ours, and they definitely have way less impound numbers than we do. Yet they budgeted 370,000. So if we look at our own and our own region, as reported previously, our facility does not meet the requirements in terms of the animal welfare and is non-compliant. Previously, there's been a concept and design put forward where it was a pole shed and horizontal kennels. Horizontal kennels are, for one of the better description, like a farmer's kennel. It's basically a kennel with a run that's probably 1.2 to 1.5 metres high, but runs horizontally. That's fine for a farmer or for you at home. Part of the requirements of mine is health and safety of my staff. I pick up menacing or dangerous dogs as well as unknown dogs. So to have an officer at the same level bending down with this dog just produces those issues in terms of our health and safety. And this is why when you look at building a pound facility or renovating it, everybody's going to vertical enclosures so that the officer never has to bend down, and then they can secure that dog and part of that kennel. That obviously comes at a cost as well, like everything. So does lighting, so does what I would call climate control, i.e. the heating and the cooling, to make sure that comes in. And a big thing that people don't sort of recognise is how the flooring, the walls have to be non-porous, they have to be anti-pathogen so that we don't have parvovirus or other viruses that are able to be cultivated within that environment. So when we look at the budget for 240,000, that was for a pole shed with horizontal kennels only. What we're currently proposing, and we've looked into, is that we've actually got to build a compound. So that's a 6-foot fence with barbed wire over the top, enclosing the whole thing. We have to have lighting. We have to have security. We have to have the kennels. We have to have storage. And we have to have a safety in and out system for our staff. So when we look at it, and if you're looking at comparisons, Masterton are putting 1.7 to possibly $2 million. Carterton's already allocated 370 with the acknowledgements that they will tweak their system later on. So we're looking at a budget of 240,000 to build an entire compound and enclosure for a pound to meet all the requirements and the MPI in terms of that. So in South White, the Johnson Street is where we currently have the pound. And that's a 7 by 7.5 metre enclosure that's made up of corrugated iron and currently with plywood on one face. It houses 4 kennels and 2 split structures inside. So we looked at Johnson Street as being a viable option because what it offers is actually has septic, has water, has power. And we looked at a 30 by 34 metre compound. And there's, I'm not quite sure if you can see it very well, but we've done a diagram just to illustrate the corner that we were looking for as part of that whole refuge centre. So that's a 30 by 34 square that we wanted in the corner there, that has power right on the road there. The septic is the existing one that we've got there, and water runs directly down that line we've already had marked out. We thought this was a good structure or area for us because it provided us the amenities for which we didn't have to go with. Part of that is, I know previously we were asked for a diagram of what we were intending to look in the enclosure. So I've provided that as our initial one in terms of a container with runs. So at the time we were playing with trying to fit two 20-foot containers if we ever needed to expand. And it has 2 exercise yards, it has CCTV, it has the compound exterior with a interlocking vehicle sally port for staff to enter as well. So that's what we went away and looked at, and through a massive effort by Andrew McEwen, who has sought a lot of these quotes and done a lot of work to establish as an accurate picture as we could. We went forward and sought advice from 3 different container companies who had extensive engineering personnel who looked at our concept as well, and have tried to amend, adjust, find a different way of doing it within our sort of price band. And have come back to basically what our original design was. As you'll know, one of the risks in terms of what we're facing at the moment due to COVID is we have, and this is everybody across the board, experiencing massive increasing costs in terms of the supply chain. We've just gone out and spoke to a couple of our suppliers who gave us quotes, and those quotes are already 10 to 15% higher than what they originally quoted. Trying to get steel, trying to get the fabrication done is increased that cost by 10 to 15% already. So that sort of concludes where we've gone. While we're looking at the Johnson Street, we were aware of that while this was council land, it was under a lease. But the indications were it didn't appear to be was not going to be an issue in terms of getting a variation, given that we were taking a corner of that section. However, when we sought that to sort of pull the trigger on that end, we weren't able to secure a variation on that lease, and so it appears that Johnson Street's site is not available to us. So if we were to look at other sites, we would need to, or the committee and council will need to also look at septic, stormwater, power, water availability on those other sites. We've had a look at least 3 so far, and we found that none of those sites, while giving us the size of the area we wanted, could not produce the power and water and sewage without looking at installing septic tanks, getting the lines company to actually create a different contact point, and having to trench out 50 metres worth of water pipe to the facilities. So while not there are obstacles, they just need to be factored in when we're now looking at what price point we're actually looking for. Other than that, that probably sums up. I'm more than willing, and I'll guarantee there'll be questions. So here to answer.
Lovely, thank you, Rick. Just before we take any questions, I missed a step out, and so we just need to receive the report before we do anything else. So thank you, Mayor Alex, and thank you, Brenda. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Lovely, carried. Sorry, now any questions for Mr. Mead? Alistair.
Yeah, Rick, thanks. Obviously, you'll have a figure somewhere in the back of your mind. What's the figure you're thinking?
Since it's Christmas time, I always think, look, it's hard to say, and I know that sounds a bit of a cop out, but 240 was doable for Johnson Street. Now, if I go somewhere else and I don't have those amenities such as power, water, and sewage, I mean, to put in a septic tank system, I'm looking at probably 30 to 40,000. So that would have to be factored onto it.
So why then did we stop working with Carterton? If they're at the design and build, almost at the design and build stage, why have we fallen out in that area?
So the cost that they were looking at was for a combined one was 700,000 to 800,000, which was our contribution would have been 400,000. So we looked at a different concept in terms of a containerized deal to see whether we could do it lower than that. The Johnson Street deal would have put you in the ballpark.
But now you're possibly looking at the $300,000 or $400,000 anyway. So is it worth going back to Carterton and say, for God's sake, let's just get on and get this finished?
Well, it does depend whether council wants to have the asset themselves or whether they want how they want to do in terms of the service of it. Whether that's a contract of service, then you're beholden to whoever has the asset, which wouldn't be us. And then if their costs are extreme, how that works. You've also got to look at, and Carterton may be amenable to a 24/7 access for us, so that we run it the same. But yeah, I mean, part of this is we're 5 years into it. We've been inspected 6 months ago to say we're non-compliant. We need action. This is not. My humble opinion is time to talk has ended. You're at the red wire, blue wire situation with the clock telling you've got 3 seconds to pick. We need to decide what we want to do. So the last direction we had was we're looking at that Johnson Street and it looked very favourable. I still think the container idea has very good merit in terms of its design and what it is and the amount of what you get out of it. I can't answer your question to say why wouldn't you go back to Carterton. If you say you're going to give me 450,000 and I can go back to Carterton, it's an option.
Councillor Hay and then Councillor West.
Thanks, Rick, and thank you for that extremely fulsome report. It was made excellent reading and a good summary. Hey, just going back, and without wanting to dive into matters that you can't share, in terms of the lease on Johnson Street, is there any wriggle room? Do we have an opportunity to put a bit of pressure, or is the lease so long term that we can't do anything about it? And I'm obviously some things for commercial sensitivity you can't disclose, but it seems like we've already got the dog pound there, and I know we were wanting a bit more land, but any commentary around that?
Yeah, it's not an area that I deal with, unfortunately, and His Worship may be able to provide better commentary than I could on that one.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, it's a very good question. Earthcare, which currently holds the lease, apparently is experiencing an increase in green waste and is saying that they require the space. Additionally, Earthcare is going through a contractual head office change. And I think their appetite for lease renewals during that period is incredibly unlikely. So really, I think since they have the legal right and lease, we've got to really, I don't think it's an applying pressure situation. It is what it is.
Thank you, Alex. And I had part two of a question, Rick. So thinking then about another site that you're exploring, are you looking at either leasing that land or buying land or existing land? What were your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it throws up a whole series of questions because part of it is the security we had at Johnson Street is I knew what was under the soil and I knew that was nice and compacted. I had existing sewage there, so we already had a septic, so I just had to tap into that. The water and power was nice and easy. If we choose another green site, those are the questions that I'd need to factor in, which puts me into Alex's realm, Councillor Plimmer's realm in terms of, are we looking at the other options? Are we sitting at a point where the dollar value benefit is to engage with others? If, like I say, if I had a similar site to Johnson where I had those basic amenities within a fairly close and it didn't increase the costs beyond what we're thinking, then that I still believe having the asset in South Wyopa and controlling our own destiny by having that asset and ability to do what we need to do is a better option that I see. But again, I think Councillor Plymouth's point is valid that if we're ending up spending 400,000 or 500,000, maybe, you know, as I say, the discussion with Carterton may be an option. Masterton's just, I think, a branch too far. That the negatives just outweigh any benefits we could do for us, because geographically we still got the coast and we've still got the distance, and so they've never indicated an ability to move outside of their own district, so everybody has to play in there. But yeah.
Thank you very much, Rick.
Lee, if I can just help with that query. Well, obviously we're looking at land that we own, but some commercial sensitivity. So in a public meeting, we just don't want to be discussing what land and where. So you understand. I've certainly had a chat with Jeff Williams about the Carterton option, and that's definitely still on the table. So it's just a matter of really, if we can, the whole thing really rests on whether we can find land that we own that has the power and has the septage to make it on the point. But Carterton are still willing to have a combined solution, but of a totally different nature. The only risk with that is that when Carterton did their costs for comparison with Marston, they were talking about a lower level of service. And so, Marston was providing a high level of service. They're costing it on a lower level of service. So we just need to be cautious that we're actually talking apples with apples in terms of what we expect from the facility. But those options are there.
Councillor West.
Thanks, Rick, for the report. Really makes you feel well informed. It'll be interesting to get an understanding of what other sites you had considered. I do have some other considerations, but again, as Harry pointed out, due to confidentiality and commercial confidentiality especially. So it'd be a good opportunity if we could actually find out what other places were available that you considered. But maybe that's a discussion in another space.
Yeah, I just reiterate that, but this is not that's a discussion and public excluded because they do relate to they're commercially sensitive. So
yeah,
we don't want to have that debate here.
No, thanks, Harry.
Councillor Plymmer.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. Look, Rick, I'm not sure I agree with you that holding a destiny in our own hands is necessarily the best. We don't know what's coming up down the track with the reviews and so on and so forth. I don't think you need to be a wizard to suspect that eventually there will be forced amalgamations on us in the future, whether that's earlier rather than later. I just don't see that not happening in the future at some stage. I think that going in with Carterton gives a more central location for the future. Eventually we're probably going to be going right down and I know Alex might not agree with me because he's put his finger up. But look, I'm leaning much more towards going in with Carterton because I think that will future-proof us a little bit better. And I don't see a big difference in the costs if we can get the service levels correct. And then it comes down to actually making people whose dogs are impounded actually meet the cost. I don't believe that the ratepayers should be picking up the bill for this. This should be a user pays sort of bill. And I know there's some problems around that as well. But ultimately, that's where we need to head in these spaces. That's just my view on this going forward. So,
okay, Mayor Alex, and then Russell.
Cool. So, I mean, I would I take your point, Alliston. We've tried to do a combined pound with Carterton. No one even tendered for it, as Rick said. We have the opportunity to get a modular system with our slight budget of, so we actually have the potential to actually make a decision here today to go forward and then satisfy MB or that we are, is it MB or MPI, that we are looking to progress fulfilling our obligations under the Act. Certainly we have yet to be decided a location for that, but I feel that if it can come within the money allocated by the council and not having to dip in for more like it looks like it will for Carterton or for Masterton, then we should request that they actively pursue it. And also, I do have a problem with the additional overtime, the transport, or spending $250,000 on someone else's asset and not keeping it within our books within the South Wyopa. So those are my thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Russell, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, my words are around galvanising the aspects of the topic and reminding councillors taking back a step. Rick's report has been one of a summative report painting the background and reminding councillors recent history and recent challenges. The last meeting we had at Planning and Regulatory was the clear direction to pursue innovative solution, local-based innovative solution, and look at the intricacies associated with that. That is something that Rick has duly done. I do also recognise that this is one topic amongst wider topics linked to LTP delivery, and we must be cost effective. And so we must find a cost-effective solution. We will face that as officers of council and councillors. But I paint that recent history of the last direction received from council and the summative report that has arisen. It's whether we can obtain from councillors the further impetus to do local site investigations and come back with relative costings and information associated with what would impact the costings at a higher level. And the other topic that should not be departed from lightly is that we need a solution soon. There has been a case history of looking at all different options, and we need to deliver on dog welfare results, or else that's going to potentially catch up with us with the respective agency, and we need a solution sooner rather than later.
I've got two comments before we go to the vote. One is, Rick, I think you've done a tremendous amount of work around this facility, and my heartfelt thanks to you for the time and effort that you have put into it. I feel that we have more control, as Mayor Alex said, if we have our own facility. And we also save on travelling costs for our officers. That time to even go up as far as Carterton, wherever they place their one, is still an added thing to their already long day. So I commend you for your report. If somebody has a suggestion of a site that they would like to share directly with Rick, then by all means phone or email him with that, and he will tell you whether he's considered that or whether that's something he can add to his list to look into. So for that, great. I see Brenda and Alistair, you've put up your hands again. Have you got anything different that you want to say from what's already been said before we actually go to the vote?
No, other than you stole my thunder. Because I agree with what Alec was saying and keeping it local.
Okay,
yeah, Pam, I just wanted to say something. Russell made the comment, and Russell, you're partially correct. At the last PNR meeting, Carterton was no longer an option because we had no tenders or anything. So at that stage, we said, well, we've got to go it along. Now Carterton have come back with that option. So that's why I am more in favour personally of Carterton. It's not that's how the situation has changed in the intervening period. So
yeah. I think time is of the essence now. If MPI have started to look at pounds throughout the Wyopa, then time is of our essence. So in that regard, then I'd like to recommend the option 2, which is recommend officers to progress the dog pound project through procurement. So I'd like to move that. Would I have a seconder for that?
Can I have
Sorry, Mayor.
That's a suggested one, but could I possibly ask for an amendment for the recommendation? If they progress through to procurement as long as a suitable South Wyopa location can be sourced and the costs do not exceed the budget allocated. Is that going to be okay with you, Harry or Rick? Do you think that's an appropriate boundary to put on this resolution?
can you say that again, Alex, please?
Subject to an appropriate location within the South Wyopa and the costs not exceeding that allocated within the LTP.
Could I just further clarify these resolutions that if you're going down this track, we need to clearly say that we are no longer going to pursue the option with Carterton.
Yep.
Okay, so that, and because I'm not happy with that resolution, so I'll vote against it. But we need to clarify that we are talking about proceeding our own compound in South Wyopa. So we're going to have to split these resolutions a little bit to make that very clear.
Madam Chair, if I could say that, I think it makes it very clear if we're saying that we are putting that resolution, that it automatically negates the ability or the satisfaction with the progress with regards to a shared pound.
So, Suzanne, can I ask you what, how do we formulate that? Do we divide that into two recommendations, or do we use the one that Mayor Alex has said?
I've got it sitting in front of me, and what the Mayor Alex is saying does seem to make sense. I'll just read it for all of you again. So recommend that officers progress the dog pound as long as a suitable South Wyopa location can be sourced and the costs do not exceed the budget allocated.
Yeah, and I'd just like comment, as I said, from either Harry or Rick, whether those are appropriate limitations to put in the resolution, or there's another way you'd like it to approach it.
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, you don't make a resolution that says what you're not doing. You make the resolution stating the affirmative of what you are doing, but you've got qualifier. So if either the local option occurs, but we're not able to meet it within that budget, then we'd have to come back. So you've got a qualifier on that. And secondly, it doesn't exclude the Carterton option because you're saying you're going for the location, but subject to. So it leaves doors open, which I think is important. But it says this is the direction that you're heading, which is to look at the local option.
Well, isn't this the problem, that we're leaving too many doors open? And we actually, poor old Rick's going around and going through a house of many doors at the moment. So if you want to be right, give him firm direction. If you want him to do South Wyopa, give him South Wyopa. If you don't, then don't.
All right,
I mean,
Russell wants to say something. Sorry, Mary Alex, Russell wants to say something.
Yeah, just in response and for clarification in response to the Mayor's rewording, the value of his rewording, you have heard comment from Rick in terms of the Johnston Street site. You have heard him mention the budget of 240. You've heard him mention that it was a virtually an achievable target. Looking at other options, the costs will rise up. So just signalling that of whether we can actually come back and deliver a solution that meets budget. So I'm just signaling that as a heads up. Even though we want a local solution, can it be achievable? That may be doubtful.
And that certainly is my concern, is that rider that Rick's told us, saying every month we delay, the prices are going up. And we might not be able to get half a pound. So
maybe we put the recommendation is that officers progress the dog pound project through procurement, and if that exceeds the current budget, that we have an urgent meeting with regard to that. So an extraordinary meeting with regard to that.
With respect, I think that's inherent in the resolution as I put, in as much as they can't progress it if it goes over budget.
Yeah. Which automatically
what
means
we're saying, it's a given that it's going to go over budget.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, but you can't make a recommendation that just puts an open check on the work. So you're better to make the resolution, which is to try and do it within budget. If it can't be done within budget and it's still the best option, then we would report back and you can progress it based on that.
Yeah, because there's nothing to say that a site may come up that's got some of those services attached to it, but may not have all, but there might be something that has some of those services. Brenda, you wanted to say something with regard to that?
Just with regards to what Councillor Plummer was saying, maybe is it possible to note his words as part of the minutes, saying that he was...
I'm sure that Suzanne will have taken down those things and will include them in the minutes. Let Councillor Hay.
Sorry about that. Just two things. This is, to my knowledge, and could be longer, been going on for in excess of 5 years. And I'm also just taking note of Rick's comments about officers coming in where we know we're illegal, our dog facilities at the moment, they're not up to standard. And I just personally totally support Alex's view. Fire ahead, Rick. Let's look into some options in South Wyopa. But to me, it's urgency is one of the key issues that we need to factor in. It's just me.
So the recommendation, I think I've got this right, that's sitting on the table is to recommend officers progress the dog pound project through procurement, as well as a suitable South Wyopa location and costs not exceeding the current funds in the LTP. Is that right? If I got that right, Suzanne?
Yep.
Mine was a little bit different, but it's essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so all those sorry, Rick, what were you going to say?
Just a question, that 240k, that's exclusive of GSDA.
Yes, it probably is. Most figures are. Is that right, Harry?
Yeah, you can keep breathing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. So we in the LTP we publish figures that are GST exclusive. It's only in the case where we're quoting the impact for ratepayers, then they include the GST inclusive component.
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember the pathway here is we'll go out to procure if we find that the market can't produce at that cost. Then we would come back to council and say this is what the market can sustain, and then it's a choice for you whether you want to commit unbudgeted capital expenditure.
Okay, cool. I think we've got a progress. So Mayor Alex has moved that. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor West. All those in favour, please say aye or raise your hands. All. So that's 3. Those against? 1, Mr. And those abstaining? Carried. Well done, Rick. We look forward to hearing from you ASAP.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Now we're moving on to item C1, which is the P&R report. And I'll move that we receive the Planning and Environmental Group report. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Hay. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Lovely. Carried. Thank you. Russell, can I get you to talk to your report, please?
Yeah, I'll quickly go through it. Thank you. Just in terms of the work coming in terms of the teams, it's very much steady volumes coming in. Planning teams had lots of inquiries, phone and applications keep rolling in. Subdivision certificates, there's some tricky ones in amongst the mix. In terms of resource consents coming in through the door, we're at about the same level. This year to date, we've had 191 resource consent applications put before us. In terms of building services, I'll make the summary point that at the moment, year to date, although it's not mentioned in the report, we've had 494 building consent applications this year, 494 compared to 413 of last year. So that team is busy along with carrying out building inspection work and doing the timely processing. For Rick's realm and environmental services, we're having some good interface in terms of food premises and food safety checking and alcohol and bylaws work. So work in that realm continues on. I've left the topic on in terms of the proposed legislative change, just to remind us of the different acts that'll come to fruition. The biggest action in terms of the legislative changes on that Natural and Environment Act, which is the most similar one to the current Resource Management Act, and sitting in the background is the Strategic Planning Act and the Climate Change Adaptation Act, which will be ongoing focus points in terms of one, strategic planning and fusing your planning with your infrastructure planning, and the other last one in terms of climate change and being more climate change aware and responsive as we do our work. The South Wyopa Spatial Plan, I have you'll see the timeline update in terms of that. The topic is, I'll speak more to that in terms of the report that's has its own report coming up. District Plan Review, still the live meetings happening with this combined District Plan Review Committee happening next Thursday, being led out from Offamiskel with the chair, David McMahon from Wellington. But it's incurring good discussion and looking at related issues. Recent topical chapters is the strategic direction chapter, the consideration around the industrial zone, the town centre zone, particularly for Masterton, policy and future rules in terms of open space, so that we're actually have some open space zones rather than pockets of reserves, and so i.e. In line with expected benchmark of actually seeing them as open space and noting them as zones. Science chapter, and also there's good work happening in the stakeholder engagement being led out from Masterton with the comms person there with interface with comms from Carterton and South Wyopa. The other topic that we've just had a good discussion around in terms of to get our thinking and direction on is the combined pound. So we need to do further work there, but it's not an easy topic. Yes, it is time consuming, but we need to get to a that decision where we're addressing and delivering a new facility, mindful of cost, mindful of dog welfare needs, and mindful of not letting it drag on any longer than it needs to from now. And then that leads on to the service levels and the graphs and the stats. An apology because we had a computer glitch, and in terms of some of the graphs on the report, the horizontal axis has come up with garbled numbers rather than year dates. So I've got a proper copy with me myself, and so does Councillor Colenso, should we have questions about that.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Russell? Sorry, Russell.
One update not given. In terms of the Underhill, well, the colloquial term, the quarry, Underhill Road, the aggregate storage and crushing site on Underhill Road. Last update was I gave in response to a question, where is that consent at? It's awaiting clarification around acoustic information. So an acoustic report has come in response to a Section 92 request, a request for info. That report came in. We got it peer reviewed by a company, and that company has asked further questions, and so the matter's gone back to the applicant and their acoustic consultants, and they will be doing site testing and further assessment in response to the points raised by the independent acoustic review process. So we wait further. Also note that that application, in terms of being mindful of its sensitivity, that application has gone out and is being processed by a consultant, an employee of Boffa Miskel, in terms of which will add neutrality to the assessment. And once they get that further acoustic information back from the applicant, then the assessment on notification will occur. And as I say, it's been handled by a consultant for independence and bringing higher level of neutrality to the assessment.
Thank you for that update, Russell. Brenda, is that all, Russell?
Yeah.
Okay, Brent, Councillor West.
Thank you, Councillor Colenso. Are we able to confirm that the acoustic testing has been done on site?
That we've just received information that they're doing that further acoustic testing. So they're doing their activities and testing the associated noise as part of the reply back to us, the forthcoming reply back about acoustic levels associated with activity. So that's happening at the moment.
Okay, and the other question, just quickly, the notification, is it going to be a public notification or is it going to be one of the other options of the notification?
So it's potential for it to be limited notified for a certain list of parties down the road or within a certain proximity, or else it's fully publicly notified. That's a decision that the processing planner has to make, and we, as I say, in terms of neutrality, we won't be influencing that. It's based on all the package of information and then the planner being able to make their determination. The first decision, i.e. notification, extended.
And I'm sorry, just one last question. Have the safety concerns, or are they going to be addressed? Of safety concerns, we've got a cycle track going past. What are we doing to mitigate that?
Traffic considerations will need to be considered as part of the overall decision, yes. And again, that's based on the nature of the information presented to us. It's like anything, you can't undercook or overcook the assessment. It's got to be based on the known, the potential effects within the local environs, either on the site or close to the site.
Great, thank you, Russell. I know it's a lot of questions, but thank you.
Anybody else got any questions of Russell? Yeah, Alex?
Oh, I'm trying to use my hand up thing. Russell, looking at the graph, that we've got a very sharp upward spiral on consents, subdivision and building consents. Do you have an indication of the workload over the next 12 to 18 months and whether or not you are able to keep up service levels, given what I hear is about to occur within land subdivision in the South Wyopa?
I would answer that in this way. We've continually tried to be consistent in our timely consenting. That's making thorough decisions and making timely decisions as well. So we believe we can still generally meet the requirements, but it's also a good point you raise in terms of if there are pressure points, then we can call upon consultants to help us when there are peaks, not unlike what's been done in the past, but also mindful of budgetary figures in terms of not using consultants too much. So I'd answer it in that way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Cool. Councillor Plummer.
Yeah, Russell, two questions. Do you know when Carterton's going to join the guys in Greytown yet? And would that have an impact upon how our service levels are being done if we're sharing services? And I'll ask the second question after that one.
I've probably asked that question about 3 or 4 times over the last year, but I can re-raise it and ask that question of Dave Gittings from Carterton, Councillor Plummer.
But they are still paying half the rent on that building?
Yes.
Okay. The second question I have you got an update on how Underhill Road's numbering and or naming getting on? I think it's about 3 community board meetings into it by this stage.
It's got me stumped there. I'm just wondering if that was being handled by...
I can respond to that one. The Underhill, we have had a contractor, of course, as you know, Councillor Plummer, looking at that process, and we need to bring that back to the community board. The matter isn't as we understood it in terms of the need to change the name. I think there had been a misunderstanding in the first place around the concerns around safety. So we want to actually come back to the community, the residents themselves, to clarify that matter and to seek their input into, given the problems of changing the name, whether actually there is indeed an issue that warrants the change of the name and the implications thereof. So we will be coming back to the community board meeting with that report and for further discussions. So thank you for raising it once again.
You're welcome.
Oh, any other questions of Russell or Karen? I'd like to also acknowledge that we've got Sarah, Kendall, and we had Lisa a minute ago. So thank you very much for joining us as well. Right, where are we? We are up to, get back up to the top of my report. No more movers or anything like that we have to do? No. So thank you, Russell, for that. So we'll go to C2, which is the action items report. Would like somebody like to move that we receive the report, please? Thank you, Councillor Hay. Thank you, Councillor West. All those in favour, please say, raise your hand. Lovely, carried. Thank you. Do we have any questions for officers on the action report? No. Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Pam. Just I wonder whether Alistair's action for Underhill Road should be added to the action list. I don't know. That's a question for Karen and Russell.
I think we can leave it on the community board action list.
Okay, cool.
Because it's directly for the community board, and if there's anything that comes out of that that's for the committee, then we can raise it there.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Brenda, did you have a question? Okay, so no other questions. Thank you. We shall move on. Oh, okay, Russell, sorry. Sorry, you're on mute. Karen, you need to unmute.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
to the chair and councillors, whether that so that action point is a point in time. I'm wondering if we've moved on past that, but the value of keeping it there is a reminder to us. But the rhythm that we're in at the moment is consideration of a local solution. We've done elements of the liaise with Masterton and consideration of Carterton district. So we're in local situation and solution finding, but mindful of Councillor Plimmer's point about Carterton District Council if things don't immediately work out.
Can I suggest, Russell, you just keep updating it in the update box so that we can keep a nice record of the roundabout we're on.
Yeah. It sounds really good. Thank you. Yep. Fantastic. Okay, so we're on to C3, which is the spatial plan. I'd like to move that we receive the report. Could we have a seconder for that, please? Here, Alex. Thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Cool. Carried. Right. Is there any questions for officers on the report, or does Russell want to go through anything?
Just to note the point that the value of the report is that it provides an up-to-date summary of where we're at in the spatial plan and a signal forward of the work that will particularly happen next year, where there'll be a mix of master planning for the likes of Featherston and Martinborough, and also getting out in the community and reconnecting it at Marai and hearing establishing discussion and hearing feedback in terms of from the marae in terms of their aspirations for Papakāinga housing, for example. So next year, year 2 will be a busy year where the focus will be master planning and reconnecting with marae, building upon what happened earlier, and that we have councillors as a whole. The council will be given an update next Wednesday on the residential growth areas. And as part of that council meeting, we will carefully remind councillors what the previous thinking was in terms of submissions and deliberations, and what our list of recommendations are in terms of seeking the adoption to the residential growth areas and the spatial plan itself. Just a reminder that the spatial plan document is the large district-wide map with the things that we hold important to our 30-year future. It's the diagram, the strategic drivers diagram, and then we've also taken up our first topic of focus is attending to residential growth areas and best thinking and direction around that. But next Wednesday will be that meeting for having discussion and getting seeking confirmation of the spatial plan and the residential growth areas. In the appendix 1 is the high-level timeline for the related supporting elements, implementation components or supporting elements such as the master planning, which will be a certain body of work itself, and there'll be high need to get that right to produce those good outcomes for the likes of Featherstone and any area opened up within Martinborough, for example.
Thank you, Russell. Right, did anybody have any questions? Lisa, you've joined us, thank you. Any questions for Russell on what he's said and the proposed timeline that he's actually given us in relation to the work streams and things? No, I think it's very good, Russell. It's going to certainly gives us an idea of the amount of work ahead of us and the time frame that we want to put that into. Karen, we are going to miss your input into this. You'll have to pop back. We won't be able to do it without you. So,
I'm sure that the officers involved and good councillors will move it on swiftly.
Thank you. Right, thank you for that. And then, so we're doing C4, the positive aging strategy report, and get in there. And so I'd like to move that we receive the report. Do we have a seconder for that? Mayor Alex, thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Carried, thank you very much. So Elisa, welcome, and thank you. And if you'd like to talk to your report, that would be really great. Thank you.
Kia ora, everybody. Just with the end of the first year, I thought we felt it was timely to bring progress to the committee to report back on our activities, and they are pretty much listed there. What is listed there is the implementation plan, which was adopted in October last year by South Wiraq, and you can see how we've progressed against those activities, or I've progressed against those activities. The good news is that all three councils have determined to continue with this work, and the position is now funded through to June next year. So I am in the progress of putting together a new work plan or a new implementation plan that will take us which will cover 3 years. And I plan to do some engagement with the community and with the councillors in regard to that. But the report itself speaks to the progress. So unless there's any questions, hopefully that's sufficient information there.
I think that your report is very full, and I'm in awe of what you have actually achieved over that 12 months. It's great that council's extended your time to be with us. So I'm really in awe of what you've done. So yeah, and so thank you for that, and we look forward to hearing more about what you've achieved. So does anybody have any questions of Lisa or Russell with regard to that? No, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, right. Now we've got the second point on that. If I just note the actions taken in the South Wyopa District Positive Ageing Strategy Implementation Plan in the first year of August 20 to August 21. Could I have a mover, please? Alistair, thank you very much. And Lee, thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Oh, cool, carried, thank you. And now we're going to, is everyone all right? Nobody wants a break or anything? I keep forgetting about breaks. So we're into D4, Greytown Community Board submission on the Waihine River Plain. So could I have someone receive the recommendation from Greytown Community Board report, please? Thank you, Brenda.
Hey, I don't know if you're here. If you know that I've just arrived, so.
Yes, I saw you had joined us, and thank you very much. I'll just finish this piece off first, Shelley. So I'll second that. So and Pam, cool. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Great, carry. Thank you. So, Shelley, do you want to speak to the recommendations put forward by your board?
Yes.
And thank you for coming along today.
Well, thank you, Pam. It's good to have this opportunity, and thank you, everybody. I have had a look at what is written in the agenda, and I've just basically got a couple of points and a question. As you know, we did put in 2 submissions. One of them was the support of the board for the flood management plan, which went through to GWRC, which in its second point asked that there be some consideration for communication, collaboration, or better or enhanced between the GWRC and SWDC in relation to implementation matters, etc. Now, the second submission that we put through was to yourselves, to the SWDC, with regard to how you consider your relationship with GWRC. You do, and you've acknowledged your responsibilities under the Emergency Management Act for, emergency risk mitigation, etc. Now, I have a question that, in addition to that associated responsibility under that act, how does SWDC keep on top of how GWRC is actually managing the flood management plan on Greytown's behalf? I mean, we've got a monolith over there, over the hill, in charge of everything to do with flood management, project planning, implementation, everything else. But because they are acting on our behalf in our patch, what are we here doing to make sure that there's quality assurance, that there's some kind of understanding of, if something goes wrong, what happens? who is responsible, who's watching them, basically. Do you have that kind of system set up, or is it something that you need to work on better with GWRC and perhaps also with the Wyopa committee with GWRC? I'm not making any criticisms here. I'm just asking a question because, as you're probably well aware, we've had the recent predictions of higher intensity rainfall in this region, and it's only going to get worse. So, you know, the likelihood perhaps of a few floods or whatever may be raising. So it is important that SWDC, perhaps if it isn't already, actually tries to step up or enhance its collaboration or its relationship with GWRC in relation to the flood management plan implementation, monitoring and evaluation, and working into that risk mitigation, because that is so important, and that works into your responsibilities under the Emergency Management Act. So, you know, basically we just need to be watching over and protecting our own patch. So I beg, ask, welcome, comment.
Thank you, Shelley. Appreciate that. Mr. O'Leary, you're proposing that we just note the recommendations. Would you like to speak to that and the questions that Shelley has just raised?
I think it's an interesting point that Shelley has raised. However, I think it's best that councillors offer their own insight in terms of that relationship and the ongoing functioning and the implementation. My initial response is in the report. You would hope that Greater Wellington Regional Council writes good relevant policy with a decent length of outlook in terms of time and has the backup for the implementation components. But I think councillors should offer their own insight in terms of the relationship topic and the implementation.
Okay, does anyone want to speak to that? Councillor West?
I think any relationship with any other organisation, whether it be Greater Wellington Regional Council, whether it be Masterton District Council, whether it be whoever, I think that we need to maintain a positive step, and that we do need to communicate really well. We need to have an ongoing relationship, and it's working up a rapport between the two in order to make sure that things are kept on top of things. So I do think it's important, and thank you, Shelley, for raising this.
Thank you.
Appreciate your efforts.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hay?
Hi there, Shelley, welcome.
Hi.
Look, I've been involved with the Waihi Action Group for a number of years now, and as you will know, the team is made up of also a representative from South Wyopa District Council, people from GW, people from within Greytown and Masterton districts. It was always presented as a working long-term document. So once the appropriate legislation had gone through, or it had been, resolutions have been passed, it's always been seen by that as the Waihi Action Group with all its members, and that includes iwi and is not limited just purely to floodplain management, but also the management of flora and fauna, wildlife, etc. So from my perspective, I think they've developed an extraordinary relationship with GW over the years, and of course, because we have a representative on it, of course we were watching the brief, but for my part, I think it's in very good hands, and they've achieved an extraordinary result. And I have no doubt that the Waihi Action Group will be keeping a very fast eye on how it rolls out. So I don't think we need to act as a watchdog in this instance. I think we normally would always, as Brenda says, continue to want to have good working relationships with our colleagues, both on this side of the hill and that side of the hill. So that's my view.
Can I ask
Shelley? Yeah.
Thank you, Lee. Yes, you're quite right. I am aware of the amazing work that a lot of good people have done with that. But thinking into the future, are there any, a lot of these things are based on good human rapport, relationships, as we're discussing. But is there anything written down which sort of gives people the standards, i.e. you get new people coming in all the time, and you talking about the future, it is a living plan, it's something that's going on for the next 70 or 100 years, and so what is there existing, what guidelines are there for people to maintain the right sort of quality, the right standards, the right measures, so that you could have a contractor who doesn't fit the bill. They may do something and it might have terrible implications down the line. And you know what witch hunts are like. They're damned expensive, they're time wasting, they don't resolve much. But if something goes wrong and it hasn't been covered in legislation or terms of reference or God knows what, that's when we can get into trouble and all our good relationships can be eroded. And so I know it sounds like it might be a bit of nitpicking, but someone's kind of got to ask these questions if they haven't already been asked and haven't already been dealt with. So that's kind of what I'm doing. How well defined is the sort of legislation or the recommendations about what are the standards, how well defined are the standards?
I would suggest that the report that was produced by the Waihi Action Group, from memory, was hundreds of pages. And I'm sure you know John Boone, who I admire a lot, along with the rest of the team. And they had covered off a lot. It's not our job to look at the minutiae. I don't mean to be, it's not your job, it's not my job. And we're all going to be dead and gone in 100 years' time. So you have to trust the process. And I would suggest those are questions I'd ask of John Boone and the team, but certainly in the meetings I sat in on, it was extraordinary, the level of detail, and not, as I said, not just around the flooding, but also the ecosystem, etc. So I think it's not a question for today, is my own view. I think it's outside our remit, to be honest. But I'd certainly encourage you to go and attend one of the Waihi Action Group meetings and discuss it with them, because I think you'd maybe get the answers you would like. But that's just my thought. So that's me, over and out.
Excuse me answering. Alistair, you wanted to say something? And then Mary Alex.
Yeah, Shelley, if you remember the presentation that John gave us to the community board, excellent presentation. Remember, he talked about that this is a very new way of thinking for the regional council. It's unique. It's never been done before in their setting. So they are now working through how they will work in this environment because they don't know. So I think it's very early days yet. I think the relationship between the action group and the regional council will continue to evolve as this living document evolves. And I think that's where this is going to actually end up, rather than being regulated and all these sorts of things. I think the idea that the river in itself is a living entity is part of that whole concept of this way it's going to be developed. And if you put rules and regulations around it, I think we end up in a very structured place, which is where we were and what we've tried to move away from.
Yeah, no, it's those points are well taken. So yes, but we had to ask the questions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's just, I think it's an evolving thing that we've got to just see how it's going to evolve and how they will respond to it.
Yeah.
Can I please ask one more question though? In our submission, we did
before you do, Shelley, I think Mary Alex wanted to comment on what you'd said before.
Oh yeah, I'm very much similar to the previous councillors. The Greater Wellington Regional Council is a separate council. They run and operate quite differently to us, but they have their own insular mandates. Certainly, as a community board outside of council, you are able to request of them any information at any time. And perhaps if you have any queries on a particular issue, you might want to do that as opposed to attempting to go through council to do that. You have the right to do so.
Thank you. That's actually what I was going to ask, because Russell did put in the agenda the fact that, it was up to GWRC to get in touch with the board. And I thought, so we can establish, if necessary, with the help or through WAG, that relationship, just to keep monitoring. So the SWDC is not interested in being an intermediary on our behalf.
If I can answer that, it's not a matter of whether we're not interested. It's whether or not we have the mandate to do so. And certainly, if you have an issue, certainly to inform us at the same time as contacting them may assist your cause. But like I said, they're an independent council of the South Wales.
All right, thank you.
Right, and the comment that I have, Shelley, is that you've talked on it as the civil defence emergency, and if that's flooding that concerns you and what will happen at the stock bank, then the warnings come out to Greater Wellington and also to the officers at the District Council as the river level rises. And therefore you would get that information from Jane Mills through when it's a community thing, when it comes through from that. But the officers and Greater Wellington will actually get that as the river rises, or if there's a concern with the river, they will actually get that information. Yes. Is that right, Russell? You would get that from Greater Wellington if there's a concern to the stock bank breaking or doing something like that?
With the information we receive, well, it goes to the very point of Shelley's topic, that what we get informed of should be part of Greater Wellington Regional Council doing their field work and assessment of the solidity of the stock banks and that they're still fit for purpose. But anything about any looming emergency, we are in the position of being informed as and when the good information arises and alerts are signaled to us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So,
and can I say something? And
yes.
Sometimes potentially that can be too late. Sometimes if, you're up there with the information earlier, you're anticipating, you're not reacting, you're anticipating where something may, if they're planning to do something with the stock bank and someone's done a bit of a study on it and thought, okay, we can go in there with the bulldozers or whatever. Knowing a little bit more about the potential for something to happen, it improves preparedness. So all of you and us are not waiting until the alert goes off and then, oh my God, what are we going to do, sort of thing. It's just moving it up a little bit.
Well, in that case, the suggestion that you talk to WAG and to Wiraq, the action group, and to the Greater Wellington yourself with regard to that would be a good idea. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you.
Fantastic, and thank you for bringing that to the table. So we've got. Sorry, you want to say something else, Lee?
Sorry, do you mind if I just make one more comment?
No.
It's taken a number of years, as you well know, for WAG to land on the destination that they have. And as Alistair alluded to, there's been a significant mindset shift in the way they've approached these sort of issues. What I wouldn't like is, and this is just me speaking, Shelley, I wouldn't like you to be diving in and asking questions of GW and stirring the pot or creating an issue. My own view is talk in the first instance to John, because they've spent many, many, many years carefully, leaf by leaf, stone by stone, drop of water by drop of water, building up this relationship to get to the point that they have now. So do you see where I'm coming from? I just would tread extremely carefully, and my own personal advice would be set out the issue, understand your issues and your concerns, set them out and go and talk to WAG in the first instance, because I'd hate for there to be any damage, and it would of course not be intentional, but perceived damage in what was originally a very
fraught investigation.
Not fraud, I'm not going to use the word fraud, but it's taken time. As you know, it takes time to build a relationship. And this marriage took a bit of time, and we do not want any divorce proceedings occurring.
Lee, thank you. I do 110% appreciate where you're coming from. And yes, I do take advice. And that actually was part of my own thinking as well, because I do have more of an appreciation of what went on than you perhaps appreciate. And so I am with them, not against them. And so, yes, anything that was considered necessary in that context would be done delicately, diplomacy, carefully, and with WAG totally upfront with it.
Great.
Okay.
Many thanks. That's just my 2 cents worth, Shelley.
Busy, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Lovely. Thanks, Shelley.
Yeah.
So we've got items 2, 3, and 4 under the recommendations, and I'm thinking we'll take all of those together. So item 2 was to note the recommendations from the Greytown Community Board, GCB 2021/42 and 2021/30. 3, to note that the Greater Wellington Regional Council has responsibility for the Waiahine Flood Management Plan, and 4, to note that the South Wiraq District Council officers have also made a submission to the plan. So if I could have a mover for that, please. Mayor Alex, thank you. And Councillor Hay, thank you very much. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Carried. Thank you very much. So I think that was the last thing on our agenda for today. Well done, and thank you very much.
And Pam, can I congratulate you on chairing the meeting? Well done.
Outstanding chairmanship.
And very little
Chair
notice.
ladyship.
Well done, Pam. You might have got yourself a new job.